Friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Tombstone in English, then you must like this video if you are visiting our channel for the first time. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel West Films Friends. In today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called Tombstone. I'm also going to give you all the information on which platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. This video is produced by West Films. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you apart from this, we'll discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, star cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will give you a small review of the story of this film. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production budget, box office collection of this film. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end. Let's start the video. Tombstone is a 1993 American Western film directed by George P. Cosmatos, written by Kevin Jarre, who was also the original director, but was replaced early in production, and starring Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer, with Sam Elliott, Bill Paxton, Powers Booth, Michael Biehn, and Dana Delaney in supporting roles, and narration by Robert Mitchum. The film is loosely based on real events that took place in the 1880s in southeast Arizona, including the gunfight at the OK Corral and the Earp Vendetta ride. It depicts several Western outlaws and lawmen, such as Wyatt Earp, William Brocious, Johnny Ringo, and Doc Holliday. Tombstone was released by Hollywood Pictures in theatrical wide release in the United States on December 25, 1993, grossing $73.2 million worldwide. The film was a financial success, and in the Western genre, it ranks number 16 in the list of highest-grossing films since 1979. Critical reception was generally positive, with the story, directing, and acting receiving praise. Particular praise went towards Val Kilmer's memorable performance as the hard-drinking Doc Holliday. The film has become a cult classic since its release. Plot: in 1879, members of an outlaw gang known to wear red sashes called the Cowboys, led by Curly Bill Brocious, ride into a Mexican town and interrupt a local police officer's wedding. They then proceed to massacre the assembled policemen in retribution for killing two of their fellow gang members. Shortly before being shot, a local priest warns them that their acts of murder and savagery will be avenged, referencing the biblical four horsemen of the apocalypse. Wyatt Earp, a retired peace officer with a notable reputation, reunites with his brothers Virgil and Morgan in Tucson, Arizona, where they venture on toward Tombstone to settle down. There they encounter Wyatt's longtime friend, Doc Holliday, who is seeking relief in the dry climate from his worsening tuberculosis. Josephine Marcus and Mr. Fabian are also newly arrived with a traveling theater troupe. Meanwhile, Wyatt's common-law wife, Mattie Blaylock, is becoming dependent on laudanum. Wyatt and his brothers begin to profit from a stake in a gambling emporium and saloon when they have their first encounter with the Cowboys. As tensions rise, Wyatt is pressured to help rid the town of the Cowboys, though he is no longer a lawman. After a visit to an opium den, Curly Bill begins shooting erratically in the street. Marshal Fred White attempts to disarm him, only to be shot dead. Wyatt takes Curly Bill into custody, fending off both a mob attempting to lynch the cowboy and a handful of his brethren seeking to free him. Curly Bill stands trial but is found not guilty due to a lack of witnesses. Virgil, unable to tolerate the chaos, becomes the new marshal and imposes a weapons ban within the city limits. This leads to a gunfight at the OK Corral, in which Billy Clanton and the McClory brothers are killed. Virgil and Morgan are wounded, and the allegiance of County Sheriff Johnny Behan with the Cowboys is made clear. In retaliation for the cowboy deaths, Wyatt's brothers are ambushed. Morgan is killed, while Virgil is left handicapped. A despondent Wyatt and his family leave Tombstone and board a train, with Ike Clanton and Frank Stillwell close behind, preparing to ambush them. Having been appointed a U.S. Marshal, Wyatt sees that his family leaves safely and then surprises the assassins. He kills Stillwell, but lets Clanton live to carry a message. He has vowed to put an end to the Cowboys. Wyatt, Doc, a reformed cowboy named Sherman McMasters, Texas Jack Vermillion, and Turkey Creek Jack Johnson form a posse to seek revenge. Wyatt and his posse are ambushed in a riverside forest by the Cowboys. Wyatt walks into the creek, miraculously surviving the enemy fire, and kills Curly Bill along with many of his men. Curly Bill's second-in-command, Johnny Ringo, becomes the new head of the Cowboys. When Doc's health worsens, the group is accommodated by Henry Hooker at his ranch. Ringo lures McMasters into the Cowboys' clutches under the pretense of parley and then sends a messenger dragging McMasters' corpse to tell Wyatt that he wants a showdown to end the hostilities. Wyatt agrees. Wyatt sets off for the showdown, not knowing that Doc has already arrived at the scene. Doc confronts a surprised Ringo, who was expecting Wyatt, and challenges him to a duel to finish their game, which Ringo accepts. Doc and Ringo have already had a couple of standoffs in Tombstone that were ultimately broken up. Wyatt runs when he hears a gunshot, only to encounter Doc, who has killed Ringo. They then press on to complete their task of eliminating the Cowboys, although Clannon escapes their vengeance by renouncing his red sash. Doc is sent to a sanatorium in Colorado where he dies of his illness. At Doc's urging, Wyatt pursues Josephine to begin a new life. The final narration mentions that Virgil, despite only having one arm, still has a long career as a lawman, and Clannon would get shot and killed in an attempted robbery, while Wyatt and Josephine would stay together for over 40 years, until Wyatt's death. Cast: Kurt Russell as Wyatt Earp, Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday, Sam Elliott as Virgil Earp, Bill Paxton as Morgan Earp, Powers Booth as Curly Bill Brocious, Michael Bean as Johnny Ringo, Charlton Heston as Henry Hooker, Jason Priestley as Billy Breckenridge, John Tenney as Sheriff Johnny Behan, Stephen Lang as Ike Clanton, Thomas Hayden Church as Billy Clanton, Dana Delaney as Josephine Marcus, Paula Malcolmson as Allie Earp, Lisa Collins as Louisa Earp, John Philbin as Tom McClory, Dana Wheeler Nicholson as Maddie Blaylock, Joanna Patua as Big Nose Kate, Michael Rooker as Sherman McMasters, Harry Carey Jr. as Marshal Fred White, Billy Bob Thornton as Johnny Tyler, Tomas Arana as Frank Stillwell, Paul Ben Victor as Florentino Indian Charlie Cruz, Frank Stallone as Ed Bailey, Robert John Burke as Frank McClory, Billy Zane as Mr. Fabian, John Corbett as Johnny Barnes, Buck Taylor as Turkey Creek, Jack Johnson, Terry O'Quinn as mayor and publisher of Tombstone Epitaph, John Clum, Peter Shirayko as John Texas Jack Vermillion, Wyatt Earp the 3A as Billy Claiborne, Robert Mitchum as narrator. Production: the film was shot primarily on location in Arizona. Shooting began in May 1993. The film was supposed to be screenwriter Kevin Jarre's first job as director, but he was quickly overwhelmed by the job, failing to get needed shots and falling behind the shooting schedule. A month into filming, he was fired by producer Andrew Vajna and replaced with George P. Cosmatos. Michael Bean, a close friend of Jarre, considered quitting. Bean recalled feeling director Cosmatos had no understanding or appreciation of the screenplay. By the time of Cosmatos' arrival, though, all actors stayed on board. The new director brought a demanding, hard-nosed sensibility to the set, which led to conflicts with some of the crew members, most famously with cinematographer William Fraker. Meanwhile, Kurt Russell worked quickly with producer James Jacks to pare down Jarre's sprawling script, deleting subplots and emphasizing the relationship between Wyatt and Doc. Russell has stated that it was he and not Cosmatos who directed the film. As Jarre's departure led to the studio's request valeting, Russell stated that Cosmatos was brought in as a ghost director, as a frontman, because Russell did not want it to be known that he was directing. Co-star Val Kilmer has supported Russell's statements about working heavily behind the scenes and stating that Russell essentially directed the film, but stopped short of saying that Russell did the actual directing. Bean stated that Russell never directed him personally. Cosmatos was highly focused on accurate historical detail, including the costumes, props, customs, and scenery, to give them authenticity. All the mustaches in the movie were real, except John Tenney's, Sheriff Behan, who had to be clean-shaven for his prior project, and was thus the only fake mustache in the movie. Val Kilmer practiced for a long time on his quick-draw speed and gave his character a genteel southern accent. 2 locations were used to make the town of Tombstone look bigger. The scene in which Wyatt throws an abusive card dealer, Billy Bob Thornton, out of a saloon was to show that Wyatt was a man who used psychology to intimidate. Thornton's lines in the scene were ad-libbed, as he was only told to be a bully. Music. Soundtrack. The original motion picture soundtrack for Tombstone was originally released by Intrada Records on December 25, 1993. On March 16, 2006, an expanded 2-disc version of the film score was also released by Intrada Records. The score was composed and produced by Bruce Broughton and performed by the Sinfonia of London. David Snell conducted most of the score, although Broughton normally conducts his own scores. Union problems mandated another conductor here, while Patricia Carlin edited the film's music. The album begins with the Cinergi logo, composed by Jerry Goldsmith and conducted by Broughton. Release. Home media. Following its cinematic release in theaters, the film was released on VHS video format on November 11, 1994. The Region 1 code widescreen edition of the film was released on DVD in the United States on December 2, 1997. Special features for the DVD only include original theatrical trailers. A director's cut of Tombstone was also officially released on DVD on January 15, 2002. The DVD version includes a 2-disc set and features The Making of Tombstone featurette in 3 parts, an ensemble cast, making an authentic Western, and the gunfight at the OK Corral. Other features include an audio commentary by director George P. Cosmatos, an interactive Tombstone timeline, the director's original storyboards for the OK Corral sequence, the Tombstone epitaph, an actual newspaper account, the DVD-ROM feature for Oriental, Game of Chance, and a collectible Tombstone map. This DVD release is also THX certified and features a DTS 5.1 audio track. The widescreen high-definition Blu-ray disc edition of the theatrical cut was released on April 27, 2010, featuring the making of Tombstone, director's original storyboards, trailers, and TV spots. A supplemental viewing option for the film in the media format of video on demand is available as well. The film will be released by Walt Disney Studios Home Entertainment on Ultra HD Blu-ray on April 22, 2025, featuring a 4K restoration. Reception. Box office. Tombstone premiered in movie theaters 6 months before Lawrence Kasdan's Wyatt Earp on December 24, 1993, in wide release throughout the United States. During its opening weekend, the film opened in 3rd place at the U.S. box office behind The Pelican Brief and Mrs. Doubtfire, grossing $6,454,752 in business, showing at 1,504 locations. The film's revenue increased by 35% in its second week of release, earning $8,720,055. For that particular weekend, the film stayed in 3rd place, screening in 1,955 theaters. The film went on to gross $56,505,065 in total ticket sales in the United States and Canada. It ranks 20th out of all films released in 1993. Internationally, it grossed $16.7 million for a worldwide total of $73.2 million. Critical response. Rotten Tomatoes reported that 74% of 47 sampled critics gave Tombstone a positive review, with an average score of 6.30/10. The site's critical consensus reads, "If you're seeking a stylish modern Western with a solid story and a well-chosen ensemble cast, Tombstone is your huckleberry." Following its cinematic release in 1993, Tombstone was named one of the 5 greatest Westerns ever made by True West magazine. The film was also called one of the year's 10 best by KCOP TV in Los Angeles, California. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A- on an A+ to F scale. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert of Siskel and Ebert originally thought they would have to miss reviewing the film as they could not get a screening. But, as Ebert explained, a strange thing started to happen. People started telling me they really liked Val Kilmer's performance in Tombstone, and I heard this everywhere I went. When you hear this once or twice, it's interesting. When you hear it a couple of dozen times, it's a trend. And when you read that Bill Clinton loved the performance, you figured you better catch up with the movie. Ultimately, Ebert recommended the movie, while Siskel did not. Ebert would later refer to Tombstone in future reviews, comparing it favorably to Kevin Costner's Wyatt Earp. It forced the comparison upon me. And in his review of Wild Bill, singling out Val Kilmer's portrayal as the definitive saloon cowboy of our time. In his review of Kurt Russell's Dark Blue, he stated, "Every time I see Russell or Val Kilmer in a role, I'm reminded of their Tombstone, which got lost in the year-end holiday shuffle and never got the recognition it deserved." In a mixed review, Chris Hicks, writing in the Deseret News, said, "Aside from Russell and Val Kilmer's scene-stealing, sickly alcoholic Doc Holliday, there are so many characters coming and going, with none of them receiving adequate screen time, that it becomes difficult to keep track of them all." He commented, "Some very entertaining moments here, with Russell spouting memorable tough guy lines." Overall, he felt, taken on its own terms, with some lowered expectations, Western fans will have fun. Emmanuel Levy of Variety believed the film was a tough-talking but soft-hearted tale, which was entertaining in a sprawling, old-fashioned manner. Regarding screenwriter Jarre's dialogue, he noted, "Despite the lack of emotional center and narrative focus, his script contains enough subplots and colorful characters to enliven the film and ultimately make it a fun, if not totally engaging experience." He also singled out Val Kilmer as the standout performance. The film was not without its detractors. James Berardinelli, writing for Real Views, offered a negative review, recalling how he thought, "The first half of Tombstone isn't an example of great filmmaking, but it is engaging. There's a sense of growing inevitability as events build to the shootout at the OK Corral. The melodramatic, serious moments are kept to a minimum, and the various gunfights are choreographed with style and tension. Then, at the 1 hour 10-minute mark, the Clanton gang and the Earps square off. From there, things get progressively worse. Not only is the last hour anticlimactic, but it's dull. Too many scenes feature lengthy segments of poorly scripted dialogue, and in some cases, character motivation becomes unclear. The gunplay is more repetitious than exciting. The result, a cobbled-together morass of silly lines and shootouts, doesn't work well. Stephen Holden, writing in the New York Times, saw the film as being a capacious Western with many modern touches. The Arizona boomtown and site of the legendary OK Corral has a seedy vaudevillian grandeur that makes it a direct forerunner of Las Vegas. He expressed his satisfaction with the supporting acting, saying, "The most modern psychological touch is its depiction of Josephine, Dana Delaney, the itinerant actress with whom Wyatt falls in love at first sight, as the most casually and comfortably liberated woman ever to set foot in 1880s Arizona." Critic Lewis Black, writing for the Austin Chronicle, viewed Tombstone as a mess, and that there were 2 or 3 pre-climaxes, but no climax. Its values are capitalist rather than renegade, which is okay if it's metaphoric rather than literal. Worse, as much as these actors heroically struggle to focus the film, the director more successfully hacks it apart. Owen Gleiberman of Entertainment Weekly gave the film a C- rating, calling it preposterously inflated at 135 minutes long. He observed the film as being a 3-hour rough cut that's been trimmed down to a slightly shorter rough cut, with all that holds the film together is Kurt Russell's drawl machismo. Author Jeff Andrew of Time Out commented, "Kilmer makes a surprisingly effective and effete holiday." He negatively acknowledged that there was a misguided romantic subplot and the ending rather sprawls, but ultimately exclaimed the film was rootin' tootin' entertainment with lots of authentic facial hair. Richard Harrington of the Washington Post highlighted the film's shortcomings, declaring, "Too much of Tombstone rings hollow. In retrospect, not much happens and little that does seems warranted. There are so many unrealized relationships you almost hope for redemption in a longer video version. This one is unsatisfying and unfulfilling." Alternately, though, columnist Bob Bloom of the Journal and Courier openly remarked that the film may not be historically accurate, but offers a lot of punch for the buck. He concluded by saying it was a tough, guilty pleasure Western. Although Val Kilmer's performance as Doc Holliday was praised, he did not get an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor. He was nominated for Best Male Performance and Most Desirable Male at the MTV Movie Awards. Books A paperback novel of the same name, adapted from Kevin Jarre's screenplay, written by Giles Tippett and published by Berkeley Publishers, was released on January 1st, 1994. The book dramatizes the real-life events of the gunfight at the OK Corral and Earp Vendetta ride, as depicted in the film. It expands on Western genre ideas in Jarre's screenplay. The Making of Tombstone, a book about the film, was published in 2018. The Old West has rarely looked as opulent as it does in Tombstone, the director George P. Cosmatos' retelling of the Wyatt Earp story. In this capacious Western with many modern touches, the Arizona boomtown and site of the legendary OK Corral has a seedy vaudevillian grandeur that makes it a direct forerunner of Las Vegas. The streets may be dusty, but they are very wide. The gambling halls and theaters have a gilt-edged Victorian glamour that contrasts sharply with the shoot-'em-up exuberance of patrons who, when roused to enthusiasm, are liable to fire their guns into the air. And in time-honored nouveau-rich style, the affluent citizens of a city made rich from silver enjoy dressing to the nines. Tombstone, which opens tomorrow, is as up-to-date in its political consciousness as it is visually spiffy. When Wyatt Earp, Kurt Russell, arrives in Tombstone from Dodge City, hoping to start a business and live peacefully, he bears the weight heavily of having once killed people in his line of duty as a peace officer. It takes a lot of prodding before he reluctantly pins on a marshal's badge and pursues the cowboy gang that is terrorizing the town. That gang of more than 30 is explicitly compared to a modern-day crime syndicate in Kevin Jarre's self-consciously up-to-date screenplay. Led by the evil Johnny Ringo, Michael Biehn, an outlaw who is described as wanting revenge for being born, it even includes one Old West homosexual, a character nicknamed Sister Boy, Jason Priestley. The screenplay also takes pains to establish the existence of an Asian population in Tombstone that is discriminated against. The film has a very contemporary attitude toward alcohol and drug abuse. Although Wyatt's best friend, Doc Holliday, Val Kilmer, executes a number of heroic deeds, throughout the film he is a jaundiced, perspiring wreck who is clearly drinking himself to death. Twice during the film, he collapses from what appears to be liver failure and coughs up blood. Wyatt's wife, Maddie, Dana Wheeler Nicholson, who suffers from recurrent headaches, is addicted to laudanum. A wild-eyed wraith subject to intense mood swings, she is by turns scary and pitiful. The movie's most modern psychological touch is its depiction of Josephine, Dana Delaney, the itinerant actress with whom Wyatt falls in love at first sight, as the most casually and comfortably liberated woman ever to set foot in 1880s Arizona. In their first conversation, Josephine intimidates Wyatt with philosophical questions like, "Are you happy?" and "What do you want out of life?" The only times she is not happy, she says, are those times when she is sexually bored. Wyatt regards her with a respect bordering on awe. Unfortunately, Ms. Delaney's bland screen presence doesn't match the flash of her verbal bravado. Freighted with all this sociological and psychological baggage, Tombstone is really two movies loosely sewn together. One is a conventional Western in which Wyatt and his brothers Morgan, Bill Paxton, and Virgil, Sam Elliott, set out to save Tombstone from the clutches of an outlaw gang. The other is a self-consciously digressive meditation on the iconography of the Hollywood Western. As in Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, a film that clearly exerted a powerful influence on Tombstone, the traditional archetypes triumph over modernist conventions. Efficiently directed with a minimum of audience-teasing suspense, the shootout at the OK Corral has a crackling energy and believability. The scene, although short, is very intense and the film's high point. And the confrontations between Wyatt and his team and the forces of malevolent anarchy have a gut-twisting tension. Grafted onto this traditional framework, the film's meditative aspects are generally too self-conscious to fit comfortably. Especially when the movie tries to imagine a more enlightened role for women in the Old West, the screenplay begins to strain. Tombstone goes to great lengths to portray Doc as a prefigurement of a dissolute modern poet, a frontier-era Jim Morrison. In one scene, the character flourishes Latin phrases. In another, he bangs out part of a Chopin nocturne on an out-of-tune piano. Mr. Kilmer, who gave an uncanny impersonation of Morrison in The Doors, can be terrific at this sort of thing. But in Tombstone, a performance that aims to chew all the scenery in sight seems slightly mannered. Mr. Russell's clear, steady portrayal of Wyatt Earp gives the film a core of emotional integrity. While he doesn't project the mythic heroic stature of a Wayne or an Eastwood, he conveys the dignified rectitude of someone who has seen more than he wishes of the world's evil and still believes that civility can prevail over chaos. As he faces two moral crises, one involving violence and the other love, you can almost feel the wheels in his mind turning as he decides what to do. If Wyatt Earp's decision to meet violence with violence accords with classic Western tradition, his cautiously allowing himself to love Josephine while still married belongs to a different moral universe. It's a measure of Mr. Russell's thoughtful, understated performance that this decision carries real weight. Tombstone is finally a movie that wants to have it both ways. It wants to be at once traditional and morally ambiguous. The two visions don't quite harmonize. Tombstone is rated R. Under 17 requires accompanying parent or adult guardian. It has strong language, violence, and a fair amount of gore. Movies serve as a mirror to society, reflecting the good times, struggles, and complexities of life. Through film, people can witness stories that resonate deeply with our own experiences, making us feel connected and understood. There are many movies that have had a huge impact on me and who I am as a person. Some films tell stories better than others, and Tombstone was definitely one of those films. Tombstone is an American Western film directed by George B. Cosmatos and written by Kevin Jarre, who was the original director but was replaced early in production. The film stars several of my favorite actors as well. Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer, and Sam Elliott are just a few of the names that made this film the masterpiece that it is. This film is loosely based on real events that took place in the 1880s in southeast Arizona, including the gunfight at the OK, Corral, and the Earp Vendetta Ride. It depicts several Western outlaws and lawmen, such as Wyatt Earp, William Brocious, Johnny Ringo, and Doc Holliday. Basically, Wyatt Earp and his friends are successful lawmen that plan to retire in Tombstone, Arizona. However, the town is disrupted by the same kind of outlaws that Earp was famous for eliminating. They soon begin a feud with the Cowboys of Tombstone, and Wyatt ultimately comes out of retirement and takes on the Cowboys in a story full of death, revenge, and redemption. First off, the cinematography within the film was breathtaking. Some of the scenes of sunsets over the deserts, riding horses through open fields, stormy nights, and so much more. Some of the transition scenes of the desert aesthetic really tie the scene together well. Also, the score of the film paired with the creative cinematography. The music was composed by Bruce Broughton, who said he wasn't going for the classic Western musical approach of guitars and harmonicas and was creative in how he attacked the score. The orchestral aspect of the music made the movie much better, in my opinion, compared to if Broughton had decided to take a more classical Western approach to the score. The acting all around was a 10-10. Everyone had amazing performances. The film was cast perfectly, in my opinion. Kurt Russell was the perfect fit for lead lawman Wyatt Earp, and Sam Elliott just looks like he should be in every Western movie ever made. However, there was one performance that especially stuck out to me. This was Val Kilmer's performance. He plays real-life gunslinger Doc Holliday. Val's portrayal of Doc is nothing short of legendary. He captures the character's calm demeanor, which also has a certain level of volatility and viciousness bubbling beneath the surface at all times. Kilmer learned a Southern aristocratic accent for his character, and his body language and unique demeanor he brought to Holliday's character is a big part of why the movie was so successful. This was by far one of Val's greatest performances of his career. The plot was very well set, and it kept me hooked through the entire film. I found myself growing attached to certain characters. There were many deaths in this movie, so when a character I grew to love was on the brink of death, I resonated with the emotions that were felt by the characters in the film. There was a particular scene where Kurt Russell's character, Wyatt Earp, had one of his best friends die in his arms. He walked out in the rain with his friend's blood on his hands, and he started to cry. This was an example of a scene that provoked certain emotions, and I was kind of feeling what the main character was feeling. The director and actors did a great job with this. Wyatt Earp is Tombstone's main character, but Doc Holliday is its hero, at least to me. Kurt Russell's Earp is tall, straight-backed, and broad-shouldered. He has tanned skin and a personality as imposing as his physique. Val Kilmer's Holliday is smaller and unmistakably sickly. He has a vampiric pallor and constantly coughs, stumbles, and sweats. He's dying of tuberculosis, but he's still the fastest gun in the West. Like Doc Holliday, I am diminished and disabled by long-term illness. Like him, I spend much of my time suffering in bed, recovering from brief exertions. But my brief exertions don't include winning the gunfight at the OK Corral or 12 consecutive pots at poker. When people hear that the movie character I would most like to be is from Tombstone, they assume I mean Wyatt Earp. I can never understand why. Wyatt Earp is good in a gunfight. He's brave and generally hits what he aims at, but he's not a gunfighter in the classic sense. He's no quick-draw specialist. In contrast, the outlaw Johnny Ringo, Michael Biehn, is a legitimate gunslinger. Ringo engineers fights he knows he will win, like a boxer handpicking his opponents. This is why he challenges Earp to a one-on-one shootout. And it is why, learning of the challenge, Doc Holliday staggers from his sickbed to take Earp's place. For me, what follows is one of the most inspiring sights in cinema. The disabled supporting character fighting through his physical limitations to easily defeat an enemy who has the film's great able-bodied hero completely outclassed. When Ringo thinks he sees Earp approaching, he is thrilled and eager to fight. When he recognizes instead the pallid, infirm figure of Doc Holliday, he is suddenly terrified and stammers that their previous disagreements don't amount to a real quarrel. "I was just fooling about," says Ringo. "I wasn't," says Holliday, and his eyes announce that the reckoning has arrived. It's the coolest a chronically ill character has ever looked on screen. By this point, Wyatt Earp would already have been dead. Growing up, I often fantasized about being one of the heroes of the Old West, played by Clint Eastwood or John Wayne, but I eventually realized that if I became one, I'd have to give up my favorite pleasures. Rooster Cogburn and The Man with No Name are not noted for their sensitivity to the arts. But if I became Kilmer's Doc Holliday, I could be a legendary gunslinger and still be a bookworm. Holliday excels at the rough business of gambling and gunfighting, more so than any of the rough men around him, and yet he is educated and elegant. He speaks Latin, quotes Coleridge, and plays Chopin on a saloon piano, sending his adoring girlfriend, Joanna Pacula, into erotic reveries. And this is another reason I want to be him. Women want to be with him. It is hard to feel attractive when you are chronically ill. Kilmer's Doc Holliday makes chronic illness look good. He's a sexy, Keats-esque consumptive. I dream of being a sexy, Keats-esque consumptive. As a long-term invalid, it's the strongest look I can reasonably hope to achieve. Many seriously ill movie characters are inspirational, but the inspiring message they usually send to seriously ill viewers is that we can learn to make peace with our awful situations or perhaps overcome them enough to get a degree or fight a court case. As wish fulfillment goes, that's pretty tame. Doc Holliday proves you can be chronically ill and still be an action hero. A decent addition to the current cycle of screen and TV westerns, Tombstone is a tough-talking but soft-hearted tale that is entertaining in a sprawling, old-fashioned manner. Hollywood Pictures won the race to be the first to offer a 1990s version of the oft-told adventures of legendary Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, as Lawrence Kasdan's Warner Brothers release starring Kevin Costner won't be ready until next summer. Unburdened by the somber, politically correct tone of a western like Geronimo, this never-dull odor should do brisker BO, particularly with younger viewers. As written by Kevin Jarre, who was replaced as director early in the shoot by George P. Cosmatos, Tombstone is not so much a revisionist view of the Old West as a retelling of the famous story that blends drama, comedy, action, and romance the way 1950s movies did. Story begins in 1879 when Wyatt Earp, Kurt Russell, retired marshal of Dodge City, arrives in the lawless boomtown of Tombstone, Arizona. determined to settle down into domesticity with his wife, Dana Wheeler Nicholson, and open a business with his brothers Virgil, Sam Elliott, and Morgan, Bill Paxton. But Earp is soon forced to drop his ideology of non-involvement, as the town is terrorized by a bunch of fearless, corrupt villains headed by the McLaurys and Clantons. Like Clint Eastwood's character in Unforgiven, Earp is depicted as a reluctant hero, a man who resists the use of violence as a means of establishing law and order until it becomes absolutely necessary. The high price of senseless violence thus becomes the powerful motif of the film's last chapters, which recreate the famous 1881 OK Corral battle and its aftermath. Earp is assisted by the unpredictable Doc Holliday, Val Kilmer, who's portrayed as a boozy intellectual and womanizer dying of tuberculosis, yet fast on the draw. As it has in other films on the subject, the friendship between Earp and Holliday, the town's most intriguing and mysterious figure, provides the story's most poignant angle. The most visibly modernist touch concerns the demythification of its heroes. Unlike previous screen versions, Pick focuses on Earp's and Holliday's darker personal sides. A light feminist streak also runs through the female characters, especially Maddie, Earp's drug-addicted wife, and Josephine, Dana Delaney, a fun-loving actress for whom room service epitomizes the good life. As in many other westerns and period dramas, Jarre's dialogue is often anachronistic, combining a campy contemporary edge with a more realistic dialect. Despite the lack of emotional center and narrative focus, his script contains enough subplots and colorful characters to enliven the film and ultimately make it a fun, if not totally engaging experience. Resisting the temptation of creating a reverential tribute to John Ford, whose version of the story was the classic My Darling Clementine, director Cosmatos instead opts for the more operatic, gritty style of Sergio Leone, particularly in his cutting and use of mega close-ups during the legendary gunfight at OK Corral. After a weak initial half hour, Cosmatos judiciously finds the most audience-appealing dimensions of his tale. Ultimately, Pick's chief virtue is that its handsome actors show a gleaming pleasure in being cast against type. Russell brings a measure of authority and sensitivity to Wyatt Earp, a man tormented by family problems and conflicting values. But it's Kilmer who delivers the standout performance, giving fresh shadings to the lethal but humorous Doc Holliday. Delaney as the romantic performer, Elliott as Earp's stoic brother, and Michael Biehn as Johnny Ringo also have impressive moments. Accepting Bruce Broughton's bombastic music, production values are accomplished. Filmed on location around Tucson, where the story's major incidents occurred, Tombstone boasts the visuals of an epic due to William A. Fraker's luminous widescreen lensing. Though lacking the star magnetism that Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas brought to John Sturges' 1957 gunfight at the OK Corral, film is filled with just as many tense action sequences. Moreover, Robert Mitchum's laconic narration, which frames the story, and the presence of such Western vets as Charlton Heston, Harry Carey Jr., and Pedro Armendariz Jr. add credible continuity to the film. Another in the grand Western tradition that has seen many ups and downs but is still the most unique American genre. My affection for the game RDR2 brought me to a classic film. Tombstone dropped Christmas Day, 1993, and tells the tale of legendary gunslingers Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. A modernized Western, Tombstone was a typical big-budget epic 90s movie that shouldn't be confused with a biographical piece. But it is fun to watch, nonetheless. The year is 1879. The film showcases the lawless Wild West in the time after the Civil War. It's an introduction to an early form of organized crime, big government, and gun ownership. Issues that continue to this day. There are good guys and bad guys, but the line between them is quite thin. It looks like a fantasy football team roster. Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer, Bill Paxton, Sam Elliott, Powers Booth, Charlton Heston, Jason Priestley, Thomas Hayden Church, Michael Rooker, Billy Bob Thornton, Billy Zane, John Corbett, Terry O'Quinn. Ah, the 90s. Somewhere in between The Thing and The Christmas Chronicles, Kurt Russell was as big a star as they come. Here he plays Wyatt Earp and does his typical Kurt Russell thing. He's cool, delivers great dialogue, and has a commanding mustache that I can only assume is natural. There's some depth to the character. Wyatt Earp is retired and hoping for a quiet, normal life with his two brothers in the outlaw town of Tombstone, Arizona. The Earp brothers are played by Bill Paxton and Sam Elliott. Both do well. While Elliott was born into this kind of role, Paxton is a nice addition as one of the more underrated actors of our time. Together with Doc Holliday, Val Kilmer, the Earps run afoul of the cowboy gang that controls the town. The Outlaws are led by Powers Booth, and a better casting choice could not have been made. Booth oozes sinister without breaking a sweat, and actually resembles the real-life gunslinger Curly Bill Brocius that he is playing. My biggest gripe actually comes from the cast. Not that they aren't all excellent actors, but they are such big names it takes a bit away from the authenticity of the events they are trying to recreate. A cast like this in a fiction movie would be awesome. But the attempt to be accurate misses its mark and leads to an unfulfilling ending. It's not bad, but as it is, you'll never once forget you are watching a movie. Tombstone is a good fun flick. It will let you reminisce about the 1880s and the 1990s simultaneously. Legendary film critics Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert didn't review the classic Western movie Tombstone when it was first released, and it was only because of Val Kilmer that they ever saw it at all. Tombstone was a smash hit when it was released in 1993. It made $56 million domestically at the box office via Box Office Mojo, and it earned a Rotten Tomatoes critic score of 74%. Interestingly, however, Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert didn't contribute to Tombstone's critical reception until over a month after the film was released. Tombstone was first released on Christmas Day in 1993, but Siskel and Ebert didn't review it until February 5, 1994. Instead, their 1993 Christmas episode focused on forgotten films like Heaven and Earth and Grumpy Old Men. It's strange that the two most prominent film critics of the 1990s didn't review one of the best westerns of the 1990s until a full month after it was released. But there's a fairly simple reason for it. There's also a very simple reason Siskel and Ebert ended up reviewing Tombstone. And his name is Val Kilmer. The reason Siskel and Ebert didn't review Tombstone in time for its December 25, 1993 release date is because they couldn't watch it. As Ebert explained, the studio behind Tombstone never gave them access to an advanced screening, so they couldn't watch it until it was out in theaters. By that point, the critics were already preparing for their end-of-year review and new January releases. Evidently, Siskel and Ebert didn't get access to an advanced screening because the studio thought Tombstone was going to fail with critics via Siskel and Ebert. Tombstone was produced by Hollywood Pictures, a label of the Walt Disney Company, and Cinergi Pictures, and distributed by Buena Vista Pictures, and it seems none of the companies involved had much faith in the Western. Tombstone also had a notoriously difficult development that was filled with reshoots and rewrites, so that probably didn't help with the studio's confidence either. In the end, however, the studios were wrong, and Tombstone went down as one of the best Western movies ever made. When they couldn't get an advanced screening of the movie, Siskel and Ebert essentially gave up on Tombstone. Due to the show's schedule and Tombstone's end-of-year release date, there was no point in reviewing a movie that would already have been out for weeks. It was only after Roger Ebert heard constant praise for Val Kilmer's performance as Doc Holliday that the duo decided to give Tombstone another chance. It makes sense that Val Kilmer would be the thing to grab Siskel and Ebert's attention. Kilmer's take on Doc Holliday is often considered one of the best acting performances in the entire Western genre. There are so many great Doc Holliday quotes, and most of the best scenes in Tombstone involve or explicitly focus on Doc. Kilmer's performance turned Tombstone from a great Western into a timeless classic, so it's only natural that it also convinced Siskel and Ebert to give the movie a second chance. Once they actually got their hands on it, Siskel and Ebert's review of Tombstone was fairly praiseworthy. Though Siskel gave Tombstone a thumbs down and Ebert gave it a thumbs up, both critics said they enjoyed parts of the film. Both Siskel and Ebert had nothing but praise for Val Kilmer's performance as Doc Holliday and for William A. Fraker's cinematography, But Siskel also criticized Kurt Russell for having a somewhat inconsistent performance as Wyatt Earp. Ebert, on the other hand, found the movie so engrossing that he said the action scenes actually slowed down the interpersonal drama between the cast of Tombstone. Despite the fact both critics found parts of Tombstone that they loved, Siskel ended up giving the movie a thumbs down. Siskel said that he enjoyed parts of it, but not enough to recommend it. It should also be noted that of all the films they reviewed in their February 5, 1994 episode, both Siskel and Ebert called Tombstone their favorite by a wide margin. Though it may not have gotten Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert to agree, Tombstone certainly left an impression on both the famed film critics and cinema as a whole. Old West historian Michael Grauer analyzes scenes from Tombstone, explaining what the Kurt Russell movie gets right and wrong. Released in 1993, Tombstone is directed by George P. Cosmatos and Kevin Jarre, with Russell starring as famed historical gunman Wyatt Earp. The film, which was met with mostly positive reviews, is one of many westerns to depict the iconic gunfight at the OK Corral. While a moderate success at release, Tombstone has since become a cult classic. In a recent video for Insider, Grauer takes a look at Tombstone's depiction of the OK Corral, assessing it for historical accuracy. According to the real-life cowboy and historian, the film gets a fair amount right, but suggests that the gunfight at the OK Corral has been somewhat overdone in Hollywood for how relatively insignificant an event it actually was in the grand scheme of the American West. Check out Grauer's full comment below, as well as his score for Tombstone out of 10. Tombstone arrived less than a year before 1994's Wyatt Earp, which starred Kevin Costner in the title role and was directed by Lawrence Kasdan. The two films cover many of the same historical events and figures, but Tombstone ended up faring far better overall, critically and commercially. At least some of the reason for this is just due to the order in which the films were released, with audiences seemingly being less interested in going to theaters to watch Wyatt Earp after already seeing the Earp story on screen so recently. As seen in the chart above, Tombstone currently sports a respectable 73% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the audience score is an impressive 94%. Both of these scores are significantly higher than Wyatt Earp's. At the box office, Tombstone was a success, grossing $73.2 million worldwide on an estimated budget of $25 million. Again, Russell's film beats Costner's in this regard. In general, while it would be a stretch to call Tombstone a critical darling, the film was praised for its solid classical storytelling and impressive cast. In contrast to that film's 2-hour and 14-minute runtime, Wyatt Earp clocked in at a whopping 3 hours and 11 minutes, and it ended up proving too meandering and unfocused for many viewers. In addition to boasting an entertaining story and some impressive performances, it's clear that Tombstone also gets a lot right when it comes to historical accuracy. Wyatt Earp plays as if they took Tombstone and pumped it full of hot air. It involves many of the same characters and much of the same story, but little of the tension and drama. It's a rambling, unfocused biography of Wyatt Earp, Kevin Costner, starting when he's a kid and following his development from an awkward would-be lawyer into a slick gunslinger. This is a long journey, in a 3-hour film that needs better pacing. It's obvious that the movie's intentions are serious. It doesn't want to be just one more retelling of the gunfight at the OK Corral. The subject is the whole lifespan of Wyatt Earp, but unfortunately the movie isn't able to make much of the parts we don't already know about. Earp lived a long time. He died in 1929, 48 years after the famous gunfight in Tombstone, but his moment of fame was brief, and we are no more interested in Wyatt Earp as an old man than in King Lear as a young one. The screenplay, written by Dan Gordon in collaboration with the director, Lawrence Kasdan, employs the time-honored biopic method of establishing a few shorthand themes and repeating them again and again. Young Wyatt gets nightly lectures at the dinner table from his father, Gene Hackman, about the importance of blood bonds. Family comes first. He absorbs this lesson to such a degree that it explains, in this version anyway, much of his motivation at the OK Corral and afterwards. As a young man, Earp resembles old Jimmy Stewart characters. Bashful but single-minded, he turns down the offers of fast women in saloons because he intends to marry a girl back home, Annabeth Gish. He comes a-courtin' with flowers, and before long they are married and living in a cozy cottage. Then she dies tragically, and he seems to vow never to trust his emotions with any non-family member again. The movie follows Earp's progress through the West, his employment as a stagecoach driver and a Wells Fargo man, and his stints as a lawman in Dodge City and Tombstone. Curiously, because the script places such emphasis on family, his brothers do not emerge very vividly. Even the strong actor Michael Madsen as Virgil Earp has so little dialogue and screen time that he doesn't emerge as truly individual. And the brothers James and Morgan are even less visible. The wives or mistresses of the three Earp brothers make more of an impression, if only because they spend so much time arguing with Wyatt's notions of family honor and duty. The character who is always in the foreground of the Earp saga is Doc Holliday, the dentist and gambler who casts his lot with the Earps. Dying of tuberculosis, he has nothing to lose in lending his gun to their battles. Dennis Quaid plays the character in a stunning masquerade. Having lost 38 pounds and grown a mustache for the role, he is scarcely recognizable. But his performance and the whole movie suffer from comparison with Tombstone, released in December 1993, which was more intense and clearly told. Quaid's performance is laconic and droll, but lacks the humor and the sublime detachment of Val Kilmer's in the earlier film. And for that matter, Kurt Russell's Wyatt Earp was more self-assured, more sharply defined than Kevin Costner's character. If the characters in Wyatt Earp remain vague despite all of their screen time, the storytelling also needs tightening. There's an early sequence when Wyatt, grieving over the death of his wife, turns to drink and steals a horse. He's arrested and jailed and saved from hanging when his father, Hackman, turns up and fixes things. But the jail is in Arkansas, and the movie creates the impression that Hackman had by then moved to California. How did he get the news and return east in time to save his son in the days before railroads? One sequence late in the film could have been left out with great benefit. The Earps are returning on a train with the body of a dead brother and are alerted that they may be ambushed. As the train pauses at a station late at night, there is a complex gunfight in the shadows as characters dart around the cars and fire at one another. This whole sequence is handled so confusingly that it's hard to get an idea of the strategy, the progress, or the outcome. Another sequence, a flashback at the end or Earp quelling an angry mob, is also pointless. More to the point, the movie isn't sure what it wants to say about Wyatt Earp. Was he a hero? A civilized man who became a killer? A gifted lawman? A man who initiated violence? The movie votes for all four choices. There is also a lot of screen time devoted unprofitably to Earp's romantic life. After the death of the first wife, he has a long-time relationship with a hooker, Mare Winningham, whose best qualification is that she makes few demands. But she starts making a lot of them after Wyatt falls for the beautiful Josie, Joanna Going, an independent woman from San Francisco. The hooker makes several suicide attempts, while Josie tries to adapt herself to the situation. But finally there's a scene where Earp is trying to deal with death, violence, and two screaming women all at once. And it goes over the top. Costner's character isn't written clearly enough for us to understand his confusion about his liaisons. If they are only sexual, then why does he masochistically allow them to continue? Is it unfair to compare Wyatt Earp to Tombstone simply because they've been released in the same 6-month window? Perhaps. Wyatt Earp is certainly the more ambitious project, but Tombstone was more clear about its goals and more certain about how to reach them. It forced the comparison upon me. Wyatt Earp has brave pretensions and a large canvas, but it is finally just too slow and not very compelling. The Western film has been around since the golden age of cinema. However, in the 1980s and 1990s, the Western genre was almost non-existent aside from Young Guns Unforgiven and a little film called Tombstone, starring an amazing ensemble cast of Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer, Sam Elliott, Bill Paxton, Powers Booth, Michael Biehn, Charlton Heston, Jason Priestley, John Tenney, and Stephen Lang. Tombstone tells the continuing story of Wyatt Earp after his successful cleaning up of Dodge City. Wyatt Earp moves to Tombstone, Arizona, and wishes to get rich in obscurity. He meets his brothers there, as well as his old friend Doc Holliday. A band of outlaws that call themselves the Cowboys are causing problems in the region with various acts of random violence, and inevitably come into confrontation with Holliday and the Earps, which lead to a shootout at the OK Corral. The casting of Tombstone is top-notch with everyone on top of their game, and I dare say the best performance Val Kilmer has put on film. Each character is fully fleshed out and their motives are extremely believable. The directing of Tombstone is also top-notch, with great sweeping action moments, and at the same time, there are great close-up shots for the dramatic ones. While George P. Cosmatos' Rambo First Blood Part 2 is credited with directing Tombstone, there has been much controversy in recent years that actor Kurt Russell himself actually directed the film, while George P. Cosmatos' name was just added to appease the studio. As expected with a great action film, the audio quality is amazing. It provides a digital soundtrack that allows you to feel every horse gallop on your home theater. However, the video quality of the film prevents Tombstone from becoming a demo disc for your system. While using the latest AVC codec, Tombstone's video suffers from too much grain on the picture and very dull colors. Hopefully, this will be corrected if a director cut of the film is ever released. Another disappointment on the disc is that the special features on the disc are a bit sparse and are only encoded in 480p. They include the making of Tombstone, featurette in 3 parts, an ensemble cast, making an authentic Western, and the gunfight at the OK Corral. Director's original storyboards, and theatrical trailers, teasers, and TV spots catalog titles. Disney is unleashing 2 of their most beloved action films from the 90s, with Tombstone and Armageddon. The first follows Wyatt Earp, Kurt Russell, and his brothers, Sam Elliott, Bill Paxton, as they team with Doc Holliday, Val Kilmer, to fight off the Clantons, Curly Bill Brocious, Powers Booth, and his gang of cowboys. While in Armageddon, Harry Stamper, Bruce Willis, leads a crew of his oil drilling team, including Will Patton, Ben Affleck, Owen Wilson, Michael Clark Duncan, and Steve Buscemi, with assistance from NASA to destroy a giant meteor heading to kill everyone on Earth. These are manly movies, even if they have love interest subplots that detract from men doing men things, like getting in gunfights and drilling for oil. My reviews of the Blu-rays of Armageddon and Tombstone after the jump. First things first, though, the Blu-ray transfers are excellent, but the supplements are weak as hell. Both films had 2-disc special editions, and both had commentary tracks. And where Disney got the rights to all the Criterion content for their earlier release of the Rock on Blue, they did not do the legwork here. Armageddon only comes with 2 trailers and a music video. Tombstone does not include the director's cut, but does offer a making of, 27 min. The director's storyboards, 4 min. 2 trailers and 7 TV spots. Of course, both films come in 1080p, and as Armageddon was never released in America anamorphically, it's a big step up from the Criterion DVD. Both also come in 5.1 DTS HD, and in terms of sound and vision, these are great demo disc quality. Tombstone is the better of the 2 movies, simply by virtue of its cast. Russell, Paxton, Elliott, Kilmer, Powers Booth, Michael Biehn, Thomas Hayden Church, Jason Priestley, Dana Delaney, Charlton Heston, Billy Bob Thornton, Stephen Lang, Billy Zane, John Tenney, Michael Rooker, Terry O'Quinn, and Frank Stallone, with Robert Mitchum as the narrator. Holy shit, that's a cast! And watching the film again, I was more engaged this time than the last time I saw it in the theater, simply because it's the sort of large cast of famous and the would-be famous later casts that every couple of minutes someone turns up or has a scene, and you think to yourself, I can't believe all these guys are in one movie. As a take on the Earp legend and the showdown at the OK Corral, 1993's Tombstone can claim to be better, or at least more entertaining than Lawrence Kasdan's take on the subject matter in 1994's Wyatt Earp, which proved to be a meandering washout when it should have had some great themes and all that. But when you stack either against John Ford's perfect My Darling Clementine, they're not going to stand a chance. Tombstone also came out in 1993 as the industry was moving away from the sort of action beats this film has. Basically, there's no poetry in the film, and many of the shootouts lack any sense of geography or choreography. Then again, there's no slow motion, but there are 2 death montages where Earp and his buddies just take out random dudes who were bad guys. This fine, but perhaps because of the legend, there's no a lot action beats that feel much more than perfunctory. But this is a print the legend version of this story, and that's fine. What it points out is that Kurt Russell is one of the rare actors who can be commanding without having to do anything superficially flashy, and that's impressive as he's up against one of the most entertainingly flamboyant performances of that decade. Kilmer's gaunt, sickly Doc Holliday is an actor's dream come true, as it's filled with tics and brio. It's a showboating performance, and Kilmer eats every scene he can with his southern accent and pale white look. Oh, consumption. Their friendship is the heart of the movie, and it, above all the gunplay, is what makes the film work. Now that director George P. Cosmatos has passed on, Russell has been outed as the auteur of the film. It sounds like it was a rough shoot. Perhaps that's why the director's cut and the commentary were not included. Armageddon is one of those kitchen sink movies either you get into or don't. I don't, though I've grown to love Bay when he's at his best. The thing that makes me laugh most about the film is that it's supposed to be something of an action film, because Bay is an action director. But there's no action. The main characters drill. That's not cinematic. And Bay is not interested in getting us to understand how drilling works. In some ways, the end is very similar to the sequence in Wet Hot American Summer, where Joe Latruglio tells us how awesome something that's happening off-screen is. I don't know if there's a way to make drilling cinematic, but that's not my problem. That's something that should have been addressed much earlier on than the Blu-ray release of a 12-year-old movie. The film sets up a men-on-a-mission plot, where Harry Stamper, Willis, and his crew of roughnecks are sent into space to drill into an asteroid. This is a good setup, and it could be kick-ass, but it takes them forever to get into outer space, though the training sequences are some of the best parts of the film. But I would probably have cut from the stamp of approval on their apps to the launch sequence. With the film running 151 minutes, you get to feel the weight of the running time. And that's never a good thing. It's bloated, and it sinks some, but not all, of the straight camp appeal of a film like this. Root for Kurt Russell. Here we have a Western icon in all his mustachioed glory, and his lines are few and far between. The real Virgil. Her led the brothers to Tombstone, and had a glowing reputation as ailment at that point, so there was no excuse to keep his role minimal. Tombstone has excellent cinematography. The thunderstorm scene. After the OK Corral in particular is beautifully shot and so intense, it gives me goosebumps every time when the Her Party is hunting down the cowboys. There's a scene where Wyatt Trefel whacks a cowboy in the face at a full gallop. A split-second shot of massive blood spray and a backward roll off the horse is so goddamn good, one of my friends. At work, I tried to get Met Watch's favorite film for months. Not that I hadn't art of it, not that I haven't wanted to watch it. Believe me, it's been on my list for some time, a long time, but like a lot of films, I never got around to it well. He told him I'd watch, and I finally did. Sometimes words don't do justice to a film more than an actor in a signature role. I wasn't sure what to write about 1993's Tombstone, but I feel like a complete fool for not watching it sooner, and many times, Tombstone is a top-rated, top-shelf, instant new favorite film before the final credits roll. Forgive me, dear, for I feel like slapping myself too. Tombstone released Christmas Day 1993 as a Hollywood Pictures SL Cinergi Pictures film with Buena Vista Pictures handling, Distribution. This Western relives the famous shootout at the OK Corral involving the three brothers and Doc Holliday, and the aftermath, including the famed but widely forgotten Her Vendetta ride at 130 minutes. Tombstone is well worth the watch, with a lone scene I could do without but a short one, so I'll allow it. George P. Cosmatos sat in the director's chair to bring Kevin Jarre's screenplay to life. James J.X. Sean Daniel. And Bob Nessosi produced. Now, who's the actor I hinted at in the signature role? Who's on the streets of Tombstone, Arizona? Christ, who isn't? We've got a famous cast. It should start with the hearse and go from the re. Sam Elliott, Virgil, it's a Western Sioux, of course, he's here. Bill Paxton, Morgan, Top, Kurt Russell, White, Val Kilmer. As Doc Holliday is the actor in the signature role, he made a great film amazing, and his portrayal down to the southern draw gave me new film hero. I love him. In this film, ask this character Tombstone would still be good without him, but not near a Cephas in my eyes. Thank you, sir. Then there's the heels, the black hats, or in this case, red. Sashes, Powers Booth, Curly Bill, Michael, Beelan, a rival, Kilmer, Ashes, rival Johnny Ringo. Those two are great opponents. Stephen Lang's amazing as Clanton Michael Rooker's here, and he has hair. There's Wings, Alam, Thomas Hayden. Church also in a smaller role, but both are easily recognizable. Then there's a cast of somewhat villains and somewhat heroes. Old-timer and Western veteran Harry K.Y. Jr. He's the latter. Billy Bob Thornton is a bit of a heel in a small role, and we meet him early. Hey, there's Billy Zane. Frank Stallone makes a brief appearance. I mentioned one old-timer. You probably haven't ever heard of him, but goddamn, I bet you've heard of the other two. You better have. At least Charlton Hahn appears near the end, and I'll be honest, I didn't recognize him. Big Bob's himself. Robert Mitchum doesn't appear on camera, but serves as the narrator. Sometimes words, ratings, reviews can't do a film or an actor in a role. Justice, this holds true of Tombstone, even more so for Val Kilmer. He shines as Doc Holliday, iconic. Other information about this film movies serve as a mirror to society, reflecting the good times, struggles, and complexities of life. Through film, people can witness stories that resonated deeply with our own experiences, making us feel connected and understood. The rare many movies that have had a huge impact on me, and who I am a say person, some films tell stories better than others. And Tombstone New is definitely one of those films. Tombstone is an American Western film directed by George Beach Cosmatos and written by Kevin Jarre, who was the original director but was replaced early in production. The film stars several of my favorite actors as well. Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer, and Sam Elliott are just a few of the names that made this film the masterpiece that it is. This film is loosely based on real events that took place in the 1880s in southeast Arizona, including the gunfight at the OK Corral and the Her Vendetta. Right, it depicts several Western outlaws and lawmen such as Wyatt, Her William, Brocious, Johnny Ringo, and Doc Holliday. Basically, Wyatt, Her, and his friends are successful lawmen that plan to retire in Tombstone, Arizona. However, the town is disrupted by the same kind of outlaws that Her was famous for eliminating. They soon begin a feud with the cowboys of Tombstone, and Wyatt ultimately comes out of retirement and takes on the cowboys in a story full of death, revenge, and redemption. First off, the cinematography within the film was breathtaking. Some of the scenes of sunsets over the deserts, riding horses through open fields, stormy nights, and so much more. Some of the transition scenes of the desert aesthetic really tie the scene together well. Also, the score of the film, paired with the creative cinematography. The music was composed by Bruce Braun, who said he wasn't going for the classic Western musical approach of guitars and harmonicas, and was creative in how he tacked the score. The orchestral aspect of the music made the movie much better, in my opinion, compared to if Braun had decided to take a more class iCal Western approach to the score. The acting all around was a 10 out of 10. Everyone had amazing performances. The film was cast perfectly, in my opinion. Kurt Russell was the perfect fit for lead Elman Wyatt Up, and Sam Elliott just looks like he should be in every Western movie ever made. However, there was one performance that especially stuck out to me. This was Val Kilmer's performance. He plays real-life gunslinger Doc Holliday. Val's portrayal of Doc is nothing short of legendary. He captures the character's calm demeanor, which also has a certain level of volatility and viciousness bubbling beneath the surface at all times. Kilmer learned a southern aristocratic accent for his character and his body language and unique demeanor. he brought to Holliday's character is a big part of why the movie was so successful. This was by far one of Val's greatest performances of his career. The plot was very well set, and it kept me hooked through the entire film. I found myself growing attached to certain characters. There were many deaths in this movie. So when a character I grew to love was on the brink of death, I resonated with the emotions that were felt by the characters in the film. There was a particular scene where Kurt Russell's character, Wyatt E.R., had one of his best friends die in his arms. He walked out in the rain with his friend's blood on his hands, and he started to cry. This was an example of a scene that provoked certain emotions, and I was kind of feeling what the main character was feeling. The director and actors did a great job with this. I rate this movie a 9.5/10. It is dubbed a cult classic and is a super influential Western film. I enjoyed it from start to finish and highly recommend that more people watch it. Because in my opinion, these actors deserve more appreciation for the work they did in this film. This was an excellent movie. Overall, Tombstone has been one of my favorite movies for a long time. I remember watching it when I was younger and always remembered how Val Kilmer's Doc Holliday stole the show. He played a hilarious slick gunman suffering from tuberculosis after seeing the movie recently. I've noticed that movies are made very differently today. Back in 1993, when Tombstone first came out, filmmakers were allowed to take their time to develop characters, and Westerns really need this. It's incredibly different to watch this movie in 2019 because there are scenes that I felt were dragged out a bit too long. Now, this, of course, could be because my attention span has become worse with media coming at me so quickly. Nowadays, how could it be that my attention span got worse as I got older? You'd think that a preteen version of me would have way less patience for a movie than I would. Now, that's not to say that I still didn't enjoy the movie. I really hope it isn't because of nostalgia. I watched it with a few friends, and they seemed to enjoy it as well. This movie is based loosely on real events. Wyatt, played by Kurt Russell, moves to Tombstone, Arizona to start fresh with his brothers Virgil, played by Sam Elliott, and Morgan, played by Bill Paxton. They quickly make a name for themselves in this new town and establish a business at one of the saloons. Unfortunately for everyone in the movie, they all live in the Wild West, in a time when there's no law. Virgil is a former lawman, and he can't take the craziness happening in Tombstone, so he becomes the town's news sheriff. Consequently, Morgan does the same because he wants to help out his brother. As a result, they quickly become enemies to a notorious cowboy gangs. So you can imagine the drama and craziness that happens next. The cast was really well picked, all of them. Pretty much became stars later on after this movie. They all did a great job, especially Val Kilmer, who, like I said earlier, really steals the show. I thought they all did a great job, and it's really weird seeing how young they are in this movie. There are a few scenes there that I don't particularly enjoy. There are a few romantic scenes with Wyatt E.R. and Josephine Marcus, played by Dana Delaney, that I thought kind of dragged the movie a bit. They really didn't have to have the storyline, but I guess I understand that they wanted to appeal to a wider audience. Really, the movie could have done better without it. There's also this purely Nines gun scene that I thought was purely ridiculous with Wyatt. Her watching this with my friends kind of made me embarrassed because I had suggested watching it, and this scene made me cringe. It's a movie of a different pace. Western movies are generally like this. They have a lot of expedition montages. There's, of course, tons of stare downs, and there's, of course, a ton of friendship development dialogue added to the mix. Westerns aren't for everyone. I can see how a generation today won't have the attention span for these types of movies, but it's really worth a try once in a while overall. I still like this movie, but it's kind of lost a little of the magic that it had when I was younger. It's still worth watching, but not the masterpiece that I remembered it to be. I'll have to give this movie a 7 out of 10. It hurts me to say this, but the movie didn't age with me as well as I thought. That happens. Though there's a few movies that I'll rewatch, and I'll think to myself, how did I enjoy this movie? This isn't to that level, but there were a few scenes that kind of ruined the movie for me. More details, right? So I've admitted before that I'm a massive fan of the Western genre, particularly the spaghetti Western trilogy, and yet somehow I managed to miss Tombstone 1993. How the hell did that happen? That's the burning question which has etched itself into my mind since I watched it a few days ago. This film not literally blew my mind with how good it actually is. It's just phenomenally well written with an excellent cast of actresses. What I enjoyed the most about it, besides the memorable and infinitely quotable dialogue or the bursts of wild action, was in my mind at least the trio of arcs that ran synchronously throughout. First of all, you have Wyatt E.R. Kurt Russell facing an existential crisis after hanging up his deputy sheriff badge and seeking out a new life in the silver rush town of Tombstone with his brothers Virgil Sam Elliott and Morgan Bill Paxtons. Secondly, you have the side arc involving Doc Holliday Val Kilmer, the dance with death he has with both tuberculosis, the Clanton Cowboys, and Johnny Ringo Michael Bean in particular. And finally, the wider arc, which inevitably pits the brothers in Hull against the Cowboys within Tombstone and further afield. George Pete Cosmatos and Kevin Jarre deserve immense credit for the ease in which this all occurs organically and simultaneously, with each arc being given its fair share of attention development and ultimately brought to a satisfying conclusion. It was nice coming from watching Fury, a film I criticized for having an unmemorable story and poorly developed 2D characters, to this. This was the complete antithesis of that. And I was engrossed in this story and emotionally invested in her brothers and Holiday from start to finish. Speaking of the story, I'll try to summarize it in a way that doesn't spoil anything for a person that might have not seen the film already. Although I'm fully aware that having been released nearly 25 years ago, that's sure to be a niche market. Indeed, in short, this film is primarily about Wyatt Earp's journey. It begins with his departure from a distinguished law enforcement career as a deputy sheriff and his attempt to find a more enjoyable and financially prosperous life with his brothers. Life is very rarely that simple, however, and with a disinterested, opium-addicted wife in the town of Tombstone, packed with low-life outlaws, cowboys, and a spineless sheriff, it's not long before trouble begins to brew. Amongst this is the alluring figure of Josephine Marcus Dana Delaney, whose continued presence throughout and free-spirited ideology on life quickly leaves Wyatt spellbound. He finds himself torn between his old life when his two brothers become marshals, resolving to help in dealing with the outlaws, and the preferable potentially fresh start with Josephine. That is what the film is supposed to be primarily about. Mr. Val Kilmer has something to say about that. And some, however, what can I say about this man's performance in the film? Just wow. Firstly, I find it absolutely astonishing that he never won an Oscar for this portrayal. A portrayal which most people familiar with the history of the real Doc Holliday seem to agree is the most faithful interpretation to date from his character's memorable, often drunken delivery of the dialogue. I'm Your Huckleberry is now, in my mind, forevermore imbued with an authentic Southern drawl in all to his scarily genuinely realistic portrayal of a man dying with tuberculosis. He provides laughs, action, and steals the show from everyone else in the film. It's easily one of the best acting performances I've seen in a long time. That's not to say the rest aren't decent either. They damn well are. Indeed, there's a quite few very good performances. Stephen Lang, Dana Delaney, Bill Paxton, Sam Elliott, and Powers Booth are all very good to excellent. Kurt Russell is fantastic as ever in his role as Wyatt. I seem to be reviewing a lot of his films recently. And believe me, it's not coincidental. The guy is a tremendous actor and his resume of cracking film is ridiculous. Shout-outs to the cameos from Michael Rooker and Charlton Ontuo. From a visual perspective, this film has a real retro vibe to it and is just gorgeously shot. It could genuinely have been filmed in the 60s or 70s and not looked out of place. There's so many stunning, scenic wide shots and cool little close-up cuts to the actors during standoffs or moments of tension, which was nicely done and really effective. The whole cinematography and General was just perfect. So take about William Afrere, it would be remiss of me. Not to mention the set and costume design, which was on the money too. Musically, I loved the score in this film. Again, much like the visuals, it was like a classic Western score and married well with everything happening in the film. It's not very often I watch a film and deem it something of a classic. This film is without a doubt in that category. It has all the components to propel it to that standard. The leading actors and overall ensemble performances are fantastic. It's got some great dialogue, excellent bursts of action sandwiched between deeper, more reflective moments. The story is engaging, entertaining, and it's incredible, both visually and musically. Also, it has subtle little moments of brilliance, like, for example, Doc's clear analysis of Johnny Ringo's draw speed during their first encounter, and the way he then clearly uses that later to his advantage. I have an appreciation for small details of that ilk. Honestly, I can't pick any faults with this film, apart from it may be embellishing the truth in its portrayal of certain events. But this isn't really criticism as such, as it will always happen in films. I would have absolutely no hesitation in recommending this film to anybody that hasn't seen it. It deserves to be watched for Val Kilmer's performance alone. Even if you aren't a massive fan of the Western genre, this film will still entertain you. It's that good. Tombstone 1993 was the epic story of Wyatt E.R., his brothers, and the famous shootout at the OK Corral, but it was much, much more Wyatt Retty from the dangerous and stressful career as a lawman was to settle in Tombstone with his brothers and their families to an enterprising venture into the hotel and gaming business. They were joined by Wyatt's loyal friend Doc Holliday, Kilmer, and his troupe, and things quickly got interesting with no TripAdvisor available at that time. Wyatt and company apparently did not do their homework if they were looking for peace or a law-abiding atmosphere in Tombstone. Unfortunately, Tombstone was totally controlled by the notorious and murderous cowboy gang, a red scarf wearing gang of goons led by Curly Bill Broch's Powers Booth and his right hand and henchman, a gunslinger named Ringo Michael Bean. A confrontation was inevitable, but word bannering and mutual respect only went so far as things escalated when Curly, while in an opium and alcohol fuel tire raid, accidentally shot and killed the figurehead sheriff of Tombstone, Wyatt. Her was forced to intervene. Her brothers, minus a reluctant Wyatt, assumed the law enforcement duties of Tombstone, and this culminated in the famous shootout at the OK Corral. This, however, was only the beginning of the story. Her brothers were subsequently decimated when Virgil was crippled and Morgan was murdered with a cowardly shot in the back. An unarmed and disgraced Wyatt supposedly slunk out of town, but underestimating a steaming Wyatt and a supposedly near-dead Doc Holliday amounted to signing your own death warrant. Wyatt went totally berserko Rambo, and Doc arose from his deathbed to methodically take out the cowboy gang and to restore order in the Tombstone area. One cannot even begin to discuss Tombstone without mentioning the cast. We had Kurt Russell, Sam Elliott, and Bill Paxton as her brothers, Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday, bad guys Billy Bob Thornton to Booth and Michael Bean. Just for starters, how about Charlton Hahn as Henry? Hooker and Robert Mitchum as a narrator. We also had Michael Rooker, Billy Zane, Stephen Lang, Harry K.Y. Jr., Frank Stallone, and a guy whose real name was actually Wyatt. There were 83 speaking parts in this movie. The women, what women see. Below Tombstone was not merely a delicious Western, as it was the perfect storm of acting, pacing, and dialogue. The epic showdowns in Tombstone were not just those that ended in gunfire, but more likely fought by the battle of wits and the vituperative tongue of one Doc Holliday, Kurt Russell, Sam Elliott, and Bill Paxton pulled off magnificent performances, but Val Kilmer's portrayal of Doc Holliday was nothing short of a tour de force. Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday was a pale, pasty, feverish, sweaty, and almost always drunken pisser. He was an enigma who had a deceptive, charming, and amiable presence in reality. He was about as innocuous as a pissed-off cobra with AIDS, his tongue was as convincing as his 6 shooters, and those who miscalculated, his deadliness paid dearly. I cannot say enough about the performance of Val Kilmer in Tombstone. He steals every scene and is an expert at dancing with death. Stealing the show from this outstanding cast was quite a feat. But Val Kilmer did it with such enjoyable and seamless ease. Much has been written about the parallel blockbuster film that was released about the same time, but Tombstone, while not being as extravagant as Warner Bros. Wyatt Up, was clearly the superior film at about 1/3 the cost. The sensational script of Kevin Jarre, coupled with the above-mentioned acting and dialogue, is why Tombstone is just one of the best westerns ever made. Extra information. Loosely based on the famous gunfight at the OK Corral, but only loosely. The movie is not historically accurate at all. Unlike previous versions of this story, this one was done more for the masses than for the critics, and that shows in its bombastic, very action-oriented execution. I personally do not care for this many shootouts in my westerns, so I was bored quite a bit, especially in the excessive second half. There are some things that worked here, but for the most part, the storyline is an utter mess, as the movie unsuccessfully attempted to be both old-fashioned and modern. It just felt like this odd mix between the two disparate tones. The characterization is the strongest thing about this film that goes without saying, while the acting is all over the place, ranging from believable to over the top. The standouts are clearly Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer, both very charismatic in their roles. Doc and Wyatt are excellent here, and their dynamic is superb too. Others are also solid, but there are way too many characters in this roster, resulting in many people being sidetracked and brushed aside. I loved every scene with Josephine. It was wonderful seeing Dana Delaney in such a serious, well-written role, and she is great here. The romance worked for me. And this is where the movie reached the most enjoyable moments. Thus, more of the romantic elements should have been included. Yet another movie review from me that features a Western. What can I say? I love Westerns. They are my favorite genre of movies, except for The Lone Ranger with Johnny Depp. And I had heard some great things about this movie, so I decided to sit my ass down and watch it, people. The movie that features performances from Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer, Sam Elliott, Bill Paxton, Dana Delaney, Powers Booth, Michael Biehn, Charlton Hahn, Michael Rooker, Thomas Hayden Church, Stephen Lang, Billy Bob Thornton, Billy Zane, and many more. The Elman Wyatt, her Kurt Russell, just wants to retire after a success of cleaning up crime in Dodge City, Kansas. So he comes to the quiet little town of Tombstone. He goes there with his brothers, Virgil, Sam Elliott, and Morgan Bill Paxton. But the retirement plans are going to have to be interrupted in the lit town of Tombstone. Trouble emerges, and the three brothers have to become Elman again. They also team up for that with Wyatt's old friend Doc. Holiday v. Kilmer. There's also a sort of love triangle between Wyatt, his wife, Maddie Dana Wheeler Nicholson, and a woman named Josephine Marcus Dana Delaney, while the Western Ella and stuff of Tombstone is great. I still have to complain about the love triangle thing. It's so sappy and unnecessary. Sure, they want to add more fell to the bone, but the love is not one thing that is needed. I also have to mention the suspense that comes from the fact that Doc has tuberculosis, which adds the suspense of not knowing when he's going to bite the dust. That is why he's sorkless with his life. He doesn't want to die in a hospital bed. He wants to go out in a gunfight, or as she called to die with his boots on. The characters are so well portrayed by their respective actors that I can't see any problem in them. What I have to give most credit on, however, is Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday, that man is Schwensely giving an Oscar-worthy performance. Well done, Mr. Kilmer. You won my ass over. Here is a new segment of the review that I will only have if I review a Western, and that is where I talk about the gunfights. A Western is usually not complete without a good gunfight, and this movie have those a good amount, I have to say. The gunfights here are well made and entertaining as shell to watch, but I do wonder how their guns never run out of ammo, except for when the story demands it. Realism is not the strong suit, but that doesn't matter as long as the scene is entertaining. The reception Tombstone got was pretty good when it came out. It was even called one of the 5 greatest Westerns of all time. Most of the praise towards the movie was because of Kilmer's amazing performance. Even Roger called this movie goods. So based on my mostly positive opinions on the different aspects of Tombstone and the bonus for being a Western point it will get from me, 91/10, it is that good and worth picking up. Even made position for on my top movies lists. Oh, go buy this, do it. I command you. This film, directed by George Picatas, written by Kevin Jarre, produced by Tim Jashawn, Daniel Bob Mosi, starring Kurt Russ, Val Kilmer, Michael Biehn, Powers Booth, Robert Burke, Dana Delaney, Sam Elliott, Stephen Lang, Joanna Pacula, Bill Paxton, Jason Priestley, Michael Rooker, John Tenney, Billy Zane, Charlton Hahn, cinematography, William A. Freer, edited by Frank J. Wusty, Roberto Silvi Harvey, Rosenstock, music by Bruce Braun, production companies, Hollywood Pictures, Cinergi Pictures, distributed by Buena Vista Pictures Distribution, North America, South, Amica Cinergi Productions. International release date, December 25th, 1993. Running time, 130 minutes. Country, United States. Language, English. Budget, $25 million. Box office, $773.2 million. So guys, this is the review of Tombstone movie and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.